Welcome to the Sandwich Generation Survival Guide. I'm your host, Candace Dellacona. I am so happy today to welcome actually two guests. We're going to be talking about a really important topic and one that is really going to be helpful to our listeners. We're going to be talking today about supportive care, and we have two amazing women who have made it their life's work to provide us as caregivers, sandwich generation members, and our families, the patients, the people we care for, with services and extra care. So I want to welcome Sheri Biller of the Sheri and Les Biller Family Foundation and Anneliese Barron from One Family Foundation. Welcome.
Hey, Candace.
I'm so glad to have you here. I want to give our listeners a little bit of background on each of you. So maybe what I'll do is I'll start with you, Sheri. You were kind enough to reach out to me. As I mentioned, this is a platform where we try to provide resources to our listeners. And your foundation reached out to me saying, hey, we want to make sure that everyone knows about these services provided. So, can you tell us maybe a little bit about your family foundation and what the foundation strives to do? And then we'll toss it over to Annalise and talk about the coalition and what you work on together.
Sure. I think first I have to just quickly say a little bit about my story because my story is what led to the foundation. First, for anyone who's listening, I'm an only child, and anybody who knows anybody who's an only child knows how important their friends are to them. And I unfortunately lost my two best friends to breast cancer when I was in my 30s. At that time, both of those families had terrible trauma happening to them because of the disease. And one of my girlfriends, both of her parents were doctors, very successful doctors in Los Angeles. And that family had just was falling apart, including a child who committed suicide because nobody was talking to them.
Oh,
And at
God.
that time, I realized I was probably doing supportive care, not even knowing what the language meant or had no words for what I was doing. I just jumped in to help take care of both of those families. And when I think about Sandwich, I think about, oh my gosh, Sandwich, I was not only taking care of two other families with children and grandparents and parents, but also my own daughter, my own husband, and I was working at that time. And the idea of what what happened at that time led me to talk to my husband often and would say, if we ever had resources, we have to figure out a way to fix this, to help people with these life-threatening diseases and figure out how they have resources to be able to get through it without more trauma happening to them in the end. And so that's how we started our foundation.
That is so remarkable. And just for our listeners, so that everyone, is aware, supportive care is a term that's thrown around quite a bit with diseases of the aged, cancer. And it refers to a holistic approach that is supposed to help patients and caregivers receive emotional and physical and sometimes practical support they need, like economic support. And I think what has happened is that studies have been done, and it's pretty clear that the more supportive care that the patients and the caregivers have in their lives in the middle of their illness, it will improve their symptoms, it'll improve their quality of life. It actually increases their chances of survival. And for those of us paying for this care, it reduces the cost of healthcare. So, your family foundation addressing this and really framing it for us, Sheri, is amazing. And that's sort of a perfect segue into your coalition partner here from the One Family Foundation, Anneliese Barron. And just to give Anneliese a bit of an introduction, we were chatting earlier that I was so moved by Bradley Cooper's initiative with PBS and his documentary called Caregiving. And so our listeners should know that One Family Foundation is actually Bradley Cooper's foundation. And that is why Anneliese is here to talk about the foundation and the partnership with the Sheri and Les Biller Foundation, as well as her supportive care initiative. So welcome, Anneliese.
Mm. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I probably should have gone
before Sheri. She is such a rock star in this space, and like you said at the top, that she's dedicated her life to this work. I'm newer in this space. I've been with One Family Foundation for about 4.5 years, but the foundation was founded by Bradley Cooper after the passing of his father, who had lung cancer. And this was a way to honor him. And the work that we've been doing up until now was really focused on cancer and helping low income families get through their cancer journey. We really honed in on the side effect of cancer being the financial toxicity. It's a term that I didn't even know about until I started doing this work, but it's the severe financial strain and the related psychological distress that patients experience due to the high cost of treatment. So we have patients that they can't afford to pay for the treatment so that they miss their treatment. They don't finish it. They go into debt. They become bankrupt. And so all of those have an impact on the health of a person that's trying to survive cancer. And we know that these patients, we've got loss of income. There's like higher non-medical expenses like childcare, transportation, things like that. That's like the work that we've been focusing on up until now. But we recently launched a caregiving initiative called Care Out Loud, and that's for not just cancer caregivers, but all caregivers.
Absolutely amazing. So tell me how, and Sherry, maybe you can answer this. You come in as a family foundation. How did you connect with the One Family Foundation and other organizations to provide this supportive care? And can you go a little bit more into the programs that exist for our listeners who are dying to hear this information so that they can make those phone calls and send those emails when they are done listening to the podcast?
I think we should also define supportive care. So,
Yeah.
when we are all talking about supportive care, we're talking about all the needs of patients and their families and their loved ones and friends, the caregivers, all services that all needs except for the clinical care. So, we're talking about whether it's nutrition, whether it's needing a babysitter just to be able to reach an appointment, pay an electric bill, all just to alleviate a stress, any kind of issue that comes up for a patient, including pain, including psychosocial, including everything that one could need, and that's what we're speaking about. The coalition came together because truly it was the first time that all of the people involved in supportive care were in a room together. That means policymakers, that means insurance, that means providers, doctors. We brought them all together and put them in a room and said, "We have this problem. How are we gonna fix it?" And fortunately, Annaliese and her foundation wanted to help, and that's how we came together. So we're all working together to get this work done.
Which is amazing. And what do you think it is that is bringing the concept of supportive care to the forefront? Because diseases and cancer and dementia and all of the illnesses have been around forever. But why do you think, and maybe either of you can answer this, why do you think that it's come to the forefront now? What is it about what's going on in our society now that we realized how important it is?
I don't know if it's that we didn't realize before that it was important. It's just that there wasn't a name for it, and there wasn't anyone like Sheri who decided, I'm going to do something about this and take charge and spearhead an initiative to tackle it.
Sometimes it does take one person. Sherry?
I think that the issues around what's happened in our healthcare system have brought this to the forefront a lot quicker. I think that the issues in society that are causing mental health crisis have also brought this more to the forefront. People realize they need help, and nobody had the language to be able to say what this is. And whether it's cancer or Alzheimer's or any other disease, when we're looking at supportive care, we're looking at how to get people to live their best life, be it the patient, be it the caregiver, be it the loved one. We need to be able to give people, empower them to take control of their disease so they can get well. And so my feeling is it was just a situation that happened where everything came together and everybody became aware of, I can't do this by myself.
I think you're right. I think there has been this sort of convergence of these topics. And in many ways, the convergence, while it causes a tremendous amount of stress for all of us, it allows for the smartest people and the people who are generous with their time and their own resources to help us come up with a solution. And particularly here in the sandwich generation, while we're doing our best to raise our good humans and advocate for our aging loved ones and somehow stay sane through it all, these resources are not only important, they really are vital. And so, what would the two of you suggest when a diagnosis is received? In general, when a patient is sick, they see their doctor, and in this case, an oncologist, and maybe a radiologist, and perhaps a surgeon. What kicks off the initiative for the supportive care piece for the family, the caregiver, and the patient? How does a family even know where to turn?
I think from this podcast, just what you're doing is going to help that issue because we need to educate the public. We need to educate them and let them know what supportive care is. We need to help them ask for it. Resources are out there, but people don't know how to get it. So whether it's asking a friend, using technology, asking your physician specifically, not being afraid to ask the questions. Um, and that's always been a great concern. And when we think about the need for this, we have to think about rural communities where there aren't big hospitals. We have to think about people who don't have the resources, people who don't know even to think about this question that are out there and how to get the information to them. And so just what you're doing is so helpful. And what Annalie is doing is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the financial piece and what you're seeing with the One Family Foundation. Obviously, Bradley saw the need for the economic support. Can you talk a little bit about that and what resources are available to those who are looking for assistance from an economic and financial perspective?
Yeah, sure. And I will say first, there's just not enough of it. So I'll just start off with that. There's just
Yeah,
not enough support.
true.
But one of the things that we're doing right now with One Family Foundation is we've partnered with the University of Pennsylvania to launch a guaranteed income trial. So that's unconditional cash transfer. So we give patients that have advanced cancer and who have they're under resourced, we give them $1,000 a month for 12 months, no strings attached. They get to decide, they have the dignity to decide what's best for their family. We're not going to tell them you need to spend the money on this. They know their family best, not us. And so we give them that cash payment every month for 12 months, and then we're doing analysis after that to see how does this impact their treatment adherence, treatment completion, health markers, emotional wellness, things like that. Because the concept is if you have the financial security to go ahead with your treatments, you have a better chance of surviving. If you can't afford to do your treatments, you're not going to survive. And how does this impact also quality of life? So that's one piece of the work we're doing. And we have a wonderful principal investigator, Dr. Meredith Doherty. She's just a master at all this. And she's a scientist. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a regular person, a regular caregiver. But that's kind of like what leads us into the initiative that we started, Care Out Loud, which is to help caregivers first identify themselves as caregivers. Like I didn't even realize that I was a caregiver until I started doing this work. I have a 19-year-old son with Down syndrome, and I just always thought, "Oh, I'm mom. I'm doing what other moms are doing." But I think my refusal of calling myself a caregiver it did me no favors. I lost out on support, financial support, resources that I didn't bother to look out for because I didn't think I needed them or I didn't think I was entitled to them. I didn't think they existed. So I think it's really important for people to be able to even recognize that there are caregivers, that they're not just helping out and being a great daughter. So we're helping people do that. And then we are vetting and curating resources for them. We're all so busy. Who has the time to vet? There's so many resources that are out there, but it's just hard to tell which is the good ones, which are reliable, which are up to date. And so we do that homework for these caregivers and we just hand that to them kind of like here's almost like your starter pack. You're going to start somewhere. These are not all the resources that are going to be available to you in your lifetime, but this is where at least a good place that you can start and it covers all aspects of care. Yeah, and we're coming from it from really, we just want to be a caregiver's best friend. We're not the scientist. We're not the clinician. We're going to give you this information in a way that a best friend would give it to their information. Oh, hey, I saw this really great jacket on sale that I know that you love. Go grab it. That kind of language, tone, and feel.
I would love to point out too that we're 3 women. And Annalise, you just said you didn't identify yourself as a caregiver. You thought you were just being a mom. First of all, just being a mom. We have to work on our language, right? It's amazing. You have 3 beautiful children and they all have different needs and we're all trying to survive. But I will say that it is something I think as women that we have a hard time doing, which is asking for help.
100%.
And once we get those offers of help, it's even harder to give up the task and perhaps even delegate because and speaking for myself, and I presume you each feel this way. Sheri, you went through it with your best friends and trying to pitch in. I think it's hard to delegate. It's hard to ask for help. It's hard to even identify yourself as a caregiver. So the deck is stacked against us as women.
Yeah, I agree. It's like we feel like failures if we have to ask for help because we see everybody else. Well, no one else is asking for help. But what we don't know is that they're all struggling silently at home. So if it's
Exactly.
the podcast like this, like doing such a great job of raising awareness, let's talk about care and how difficult it is. It's beautiful, but
It
it's
is.
also difficult and it can be a very long journey for so many people. And the thought of having to shoulder that alone, there's no reason for that. We don't feel like we have permission to ask or to talk about it, and we just deal with it because we're a mom, a sister, a friend.
Exactly. And Sheri, I think you're the perfect example of that. You are caregiver in action. So, probably looking back, do you think that there were opportunities that you missed as being essentially a de facto, let's say, caregiver for your friends who were like sisters to you? They were your support network. Do you look back and think about how different it may have been if you knew of the resources at that time?
Uh, I wish I could say a lot has changed, but when I'm looking at it, it doesn't seem to me that much has changed. In fact, I think it's gotten even bigger because when I look at the screen, I see 3 intelligent women who all know to go online or to ask for help or try and get resources or know how to get resources. And this makes me even worry more about the underserved communities and communities of color. And what about if they don't speak English? And how do we get this information to them? And it worries me about how alone they all must feel. And then we think about how does that explode even bigger? I mean, in rural communities. And so this conversation is so critical. How do we get it past a certain zip code? I imagine that your followers are all within a group, but how do we elevate it and get it out to even more people?
Sheri, that is so important that we 3 of us sit here, obviously, with some level of privilege, and I think I applaud you for bringing up the fact that your socioeconomic status, unfortunately, has significant impact on the type of care that you receive and the supportive services that you receive, and I think taking a sort of broader view of what's going on in the world right now and the way that perhaps certain governments are run and the lack of empathy that seems to be going on in the world at large, and then trying to perhaps change a system that is very solidly in place in the way that it has been back to when your friends were sick, Sheri, and it feels really overwhelming, but at least one of the things that you said that I love is the community piece, and we're all sitting at home thinking we're alone in this, and we're not.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so the work that each of your foundations are doing in identifying this crisis, because it is a crisis. If you watch Bradley's documentary, again, I'm gonna give it a shout out. It was beautiful and alarming to me.
Powerful. So powerful.
And absolutely, I think the statistics are clear. 1 in 4 of us are in the sandwich generation. We will either need care, give the care, or be the caregiver. I think Rosalind Carter eloquently said it much better than I ever could. And so having these resources and bringing awareness to foundations like One Family and Sheri and Les, your family foundation, and the good work that you're doing. And so, can we talk a little more about Care Out Loud and perhaps how we can connect our listeners with Care Out Loud and the initiatives that you have going on behind the scenes, Annalise?
Yeah, of course. Our website is wecareoutloud.org. And then we also just recently launched social media. So we're mostly active on Instagram. We're just like the grassroots way of things. And, what's interesting is that we post different kinds of content. And the content that we want to share is very different than the documentary, which was long form storytelling, these emotional, gut wrenching stories that are so important. And a lot of the history behind how do we get here today? Like this caregiving crisis that we're in, what decisions, what policies were made decades ago for us to arrive in this spot, and where do we need to head? So, Care Out Loud is the complete opposite. It's more for someone who's probably won't watch a documentary or just really just browse on their phone. That's what Care Out Loud is for, that audience. And so we want to grab people where they are, which is on their phones. So our content is very short, very trying to make it relevant to pop culture, the trends on social media. We try to lean into those. But what I was getting at was that the type of content that we post, we do a lot of educational posting, like quick actions. Here's some easy ways for you to do XYZ. But we also post a lot of like shareable content, like memes, almost kind of like, the caregiver's guilt is that spiral is real. And talking about if you've ever cried in the parking lot at Target, you're a caregiver. So that kind of content, like bringing a little bit of humor into it. But we're seeing the DMs that we get and the comments that we're getting. It's like people really resonate with that because they're like, they feel seen, feel validation. They're like, finally, somebody gets it. And it reminds us that we need to make caregiving more visible because caregivers carry so much. We don't get paid for it. We're not getting trophies for it. So we need some sort of validation that what we're doing is really difficult, but yet we still show up every day to do it anyways because we love the people that we're caring for.
And one of the things, Sherry, that, is very apparent with your foundation and talking about supportive care and the emotional and practical and spiritual piece of all of that is the concept of leaning out. Can you talk a little bit about what leaning out means to you and to the foundation and how you encourage caregivers and their families to lean out?
I think one of the things that you mentioned, which I think is so important, is that this is solvable, but it's going to take a movement. And the three of us here are a movement, but we need a much bigger movement. And so we need for the messaging to get out there and people to come together and demand change. Because that is in the time we live in, that's probably the most effective way we can get the work done. So I invite people to come to the coalition website because they can see who all our partners are from all parts of life that are working together to get this done, get all the information they need. They can join us and come and help us and to get the word out. So leaning out has to be leaning out in a big way. I think anybody who understands, and no matter who I talk to, as soon as I talk about this, everybody understands, needs to pass the information on, educate whoever you need to educate, and also to give a helping hand. Any way we can help anybody, it's critical. And the other thing we have to do is train the young generation into what it means to be a caregiver because every single one of them is going to be a caregiver.
That is such a beautiful way to summarize what your two organizations are doing. And Sherry, thank you for the reminder that it's more than just being there for each other. It's demanding that the system change because the current system is not sustainable. It's not sustainable for
Not sustainable.
patients, the families, or the caregivers themselves, even the ones who are employed, who are underrepresented and underpaid, and realizing that the system overhaul is needed and it's emergent. And I cannot thank the two of you enough for being here and shining a light on this issue and providing such incredible resources and support. And we're going to put all of this information in our show notes. And from the bottom of my heart, as a survivor of the sandwich generation, I am so grateful for your time and your expertise and the resources that you've used to shine a light. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for
For
having
having
us.
us.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Sandwich Generation Survival Guide. A new episode drops each month, and if you're enjoying it, please don't forget to leave me a 5-star review and share with your fellow Sandwich Generation members. For a complete listing of past podcast episodes, you can check out any podcast platform, or you can head to my website at www.sandwichgenerationlaw.com. Thanks for listening.